All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Great show for you this week. As always, the U.S. Open delivers under the lights. A lot of exciting content. Make sure you download and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get it. Joined now by one of the esteemed journalists in all of tennis media, formerly of the New York Times, currently spearheading the exceptional content at the athletic and the tennis department. Returning to the show again, Matt Futterman. Matt, welcome back to the show. From the newsroom, from the media room of the U.S. Open. We're into day 3, the start of round 2. Already a lot of excitement. But thanks for joining me here on the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
It's been a fun time. It's been an interesting time. And I know leading up to this tournament, there's been storylines much debated and discussed. The number one player in the world is where I want to start with, Jannik Sinner. He played his first match yesterday as we record this, 1 in 4 sets, dropped the first set to Mackie McDonald and handled business afterwards. Obviously coming into this matchup in this tournament, Matt, with a lot of baggage. And I wanted to ask you, because you were at the press conference, asked the question, and were able to be there when he addressed the media for the first time regarding all that went down with the drug situation, being exonerated, dealing with the blowback, and everything that's undertaken. How do you assess his mind state and where he is going into this tournament? Not so much what the controversy is, but how Jannik is handling it as he starts what he hopes is a lengthy U.S. Open campaign.
I think he's handling it really well. He's been very honest and very open, as sort of open as we know. But, people have tried to cut him off and protect him, and he's just continued to answer questions. And, I think that shows that he's sort of comfortable with his behavior and comfortable talking about it. And, as far as I can tell, feels like he has nothing to hide, which is a funny thing that recalls a story that his coach Darren Cahill told me, which is that they play this card game, Baracco, among his team. And Jannik has a habit of making cards disappear surreptitiously, and has a terrible poker face. And if he's smiling, they know he's done something wrong. So, take that for what it is. But I think he has a reputation among people of being a pretty honest and a straight shooter.
Right. There's a lot to discuss, the bigger picture of testing, protocols, and fair treatment. That's for another day. I do agree with you. I think he is very uniquely built to handle moments like this and to focus on his tennis and put his best foot forward. Dropping a set, we saw Carlos Alcaraz do it as well. It takes time to adjust, to the conditions, to the spectacle of it, and best of 5 tennis is a different beast. So losing a set early, same with Alcaraz, not that big of a deal. There is more tennis, more elite tennis in store for all these top contenders.
Yeah, certainly. I think he's still got a ways to go to master five set tennis. I think he's only won 5-set match, and Alcaraz is like 12-1 or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
But it'll likely come in time. Endurance is something that builds up over the years, not just in a matter of months. So I think he'll get there. He certainly has all the talent in the world.
Yeah, I looked up that stat too. It was kind of wild to hear, right? That was his first win on Arthur Ashe Stadium in his career, which number 1 player in the world. You think that's crazy, but yeah, it shows you what's happened to him at this tournament in the past. So he opens up his tournament doing well, as does Alcaraz, we mentioned. Interesting first couple sets, eventually found his groove, found where he is, and Matt, we just know that he is going to thrill this crowd when he plays. He is, obviously become one of the best draws in all of sports at this point, one of the best tickets in all of sports. But goes without saying, what's at stake for him this tournament is capping off a transcendent year. There's not that many people that have won 3 majors in a year, and he's on the verge of doing it. And first match down, 6 to go, but a real possibility that Alcaraz puts his stamp on a signature season.
Yeah, I think it's more than just capping off a great year. Because he's a pretty sensitive guy, and he had a pretty good year last year, and I think what you saw was the loss in Cincinnati and then the loss here. It sort of sent him into a bit of a spiral fall that he didn't recover from for maybe until Indian Wells.
Yeah,
so I think he's still finding his way on the tour, which is amazing to say, two-time Wimbledon champion, but he's sort of learning to sort of not get too high, not get too low, and deal with wins and losses in the ways that the great players need to deal with them.
Do you put, I don't want to say all stock, but most stock into just the fact that even if you have a chance of beating these guys in these top players, guys in the best of 5, the fitness level, especially in these conditions, just has to be top flight. I mean, we've seen, when Dan Evans won the longest U.S. Open match in history yesterday against Karen Khachanov, 5 hours and 35 minutes, but that has to be like shored up completely, because if you're not in tip-top shape, you have 0% chance.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Dan Evans would tell you he's in tip-top shape right now. He's got a bit of a tire around his belly at the moment. But, he figures out a way to survive. And, tennis is funny that way. You don't have to win even a majority of the points. You just got to play well and at the right times and win enough sets.
Yeah, I guess I meant more in terms of beating the top players. Like, you have to be, built to go against those players. Novak Djokovic obviously knows how to do it. He's won this tournament a bunch of times. He's going for major 25. I do think, Matt, that going into this event, the question was, what's the motivation? What's the form? It's unique to see him not play any hard court tennis in the U.S. Open lead-up. So far, so good. He's got a rematch against Laszlo Jari, who famously took the first 2 sets last year, and then Djokovic won the last 3. But thoughts on his form so far, and kind of this iteration of Djokovic as he hits the court without really anything left to achieve for the first time in tennis.
Yeah, my guess is he'll figure something out. He'll figure out a way to get a chip on his shoulder. He always does. He'll figure out some way that people are not giving him a chance. Like you're doing right now. You're saying he says he has no more motivation. He's like, I'll show you. I'll prove that I've got motivation. So it's something like that. But there's nobody better at playing his way into form in a Grand Slam. He knows how it works, how the rhythms are, how to keep his body primed, and most importantly, he knows how to play at his best when he needs to.
Right. I would be honored if you used me for motivation, and just state that clearly. But that said, and I will also say one thing I noticed in watching all the tennis in the world the last couple of days, but there was a clip, I don't know if you saw it, but during his match, they cut to a clip from the practice court, and he was surrounded by his coaches, had his team around, and he wasn't even hitting balls. He was just going over how to grip a certain shot, and he was getting very intense. And that was like a glimpse into this guy, right? Like, he is still figuring out ways to tinker with his game. He's not satisfied with anything he has accomplished. When he's in a tournament, it's on to the next goal. There's no resting on his laurels, and he's still very much, invigorated by the sense and the opportunity, Matt, to improve his tennis.
He only knows one way to go about this profession, and he will never sort of like wander his way through it. When he starts to or feels himself doing it, he'll quit.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And if you're, again, we're prefacing this conversation with the top players are handling business. There'll probably be more time in the weeks to come to talk about what they're doing, but there's still a lot of storylines and a lot of early interesting results and surprises and players I wanted to ask you about. So we'll start the first half of this on the men, and then we'll obviously talk about the women. But a player into the third round who had a bounce back in Cincinnati and is keeping it going so far, Matt Francis Tiafoe, wins today, had a retirement when Shevchenko retired in the middle of that match. So Tiafoe gets off court pretty quickly into round 3 at the U.S. Open. I know he has bigger goals, but I know he also loves to play here. But Tiafoe going into Cincy, Matt, was looking for that big result. He got it, and now you're starting to see for the first time all season Francis play with some real momentum.
Yeah, I think he's got some momentum. I think he'd be the first one to tell you that, like, he needs more than one good week to prove to himself and prove to everybody that he can be the 2022 Francis Tiafoe again. So I think he's trying to, like, keep it calm, keep it on an even keel, and he knows he's in an absolute brutal section of the tour. I mean, it looks like he's going to have Ben Shelton next, and the winner will likely get Djokovic.
I mean, that's just the luck of the draw, right? Sometimes it's lucky, sometimes it's not. That's the part, too, where I agree, and a lot of these players have higher standards. It's just, it had been so long since he got any sort of groove. We're kind of, when you see what he can do, it's understandable why he's achieved the things that he's done. But I also think getting off the court today pretty quickly was good for him. Ben Shelton is in command in that match right now as we record. You'll know by the time this is over, but he's in command against Bautista Agut, just 2 sets up halfway through the third. But Ben Shelton's another player that accomplished great things last year. Brutal section of the draw, points to defend. Yet he still has that big serve, and in the match today was cranking that forehand quite a bit. So where are you at with Ben Shelton? Always very hard to follow up your debut act in a major tournament and defend those points. But where are we at with Ben Shelton in this U.S. Open?
I go back to what he said the other day when I was talking to him, and he said, I asked him if he was like nervous. He opened up Ash for the tournament, and he said, just felt like a normal day, normal tournament, normal stadium. And that shows how far he's come in just a very short time. 2 years ago, he was, or 3 years ago, really, he was just sort of like he had won the NCAAs and he had gotten into the tournament that way, and he was, playing on some field court. But then he goes to Australia, then he has that sort of breakout year. And, then he comes here and goes to the semifinals last year. So it's a pretty impressive rise.
Yeah, I've always thought when the past couple of years watching Ben Shelton play, having the weapon on the serve, it's a two-faced thing, right? Because the returning you'd think has to get better for him to rise up the rankings, but in individual matchups, he's just a nightmare to face because you're not going to get many openings playing him. But the development's been slow and steady for him, so we'll see if Tiafoe's next. That's a good one.
Yeah, when the ball's in his hand, he's fine. I think he would be the first one to tell you he's just got to return better, and he's got to develop in that front.
So I mentioned 2 of them. We had 5 American men, Matt, in the top 25 seeded players at this U.S. Open. Tiafoe Shelton, they're on a collision course. Taylor Fritz, as we record this now, we'll preface this with he plays Berrettini tonight. This episode comes out tomorrow, so you'll know where he's at. But Tommy Paul wins his first matchup against Lorenzo Sonego, and Sebastian Corda beats Mutet in a tricky first-round matchup, too. So 5 Americans. There's more darts, so to speak, to throw at the dartboard, but we'll see. The streak every year grows. It's now 21 years since an American man's won a major. But 5 in the top 20 does feel like a step in the right direction.
Certainly depth. America has had the depth, but it just hasn't had the unicorn.
Yeah.
And that's what you need in tennis these days. You need the unicorn who emerges from, this world of tennis, which is so much bigger than it used to be.
Yeah, I don't want to, say anyone's capped or peaked. It's just different stages of development. Fritz and Paul are further along, and they've been more consistent than Francis, who's playing better. But do you see, we talked Shelton, but also Corda, who's kind of having a little breakthrough. Can they unlock something to go from top 20 to top 10? And is there a time frame on that or something that we should be expecting to see? Because I know development's different, but those are the 2 younger guys. This is a first step for them. But what, if any, could be the next step, those 2?
Well, interestingly, Francis said, he was asked if it's not you who's the first American to win a Grand Slam, who's it going to be? And he said Sebi.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was, maybe he was just not trying to give an edge to his buddies. But, he mentioned his all-around game, and, people rate him really highly. He had the wrist injury. He's still finding his way in these big tournaments, and a terrible draw at Wimbledon. Pericard, that crazy serve just took the racket out of his hand.
Certainly did. More with Matt Futterman here on Tennis Channel Inside In. He heads the athletics tennis coverage. A lot to talk about with the 2024 U.S. Open. Some players, or one player in particular, that got bounced early. Another disappointing loss in the U.S. Open for Stefanos Tsitsipas. This is another U.S. Open where he still has yet to get to the 4th round, which I thought was crazy when I looked that up. But Tsitsipas loses to Kokkinakis. It's the backhand. It's issues outside of tennis with his team. And Matt, unfortunately, at the end of his 26th year, Tsitsipas still kind of stuck in neutral.
Yeah, he's got to get his coaching situation sorted. He's finally sort of broken with his father for now. He's done that before. He's gone back. It's it's not clear what's going to be the best situation for him. I think he understands, though, that he needs to start a new chapter and that he's basically hit, what would feel like rock bottom for, where he's been the last few years. And, now he has the fall, Grand Slam season is over. Maybe that's an opportunity for him to do some work on the weak parts of his game.
Yeah, he was working with the Greek Davis Cup captain, I believe. But a good coach would be great. Still young. I mean, 26 isn't as old as it used to be in the pro game, so still time to right the ship. And players can have that breakthrough later. Just look no further than another guy, Matt, I just want to bring up quickly, Grigor Dimitrov having a nice little run again. 33 years old and still kind of built to make things interesting in the draws he's in.
Well, he's especially built now because he's working a lot harder than he used to. He's got Jamie Delgado, and that guy does not suffer laziness.
No, he doesn't. He certainly doesn't. And also goes without saying, some of the other top seeds that have still looked good. Medvedev bounces back after a really interesting, unsuccessful to say the least, hard court season leading into the U.S. Open. Zverev won his first two matchups, and Andrei Rublev, when we recorded this, just completed the 5-set comeback. So, Rublev's had that tumultuous year. We talked last time about the mental state with him, ups and downs, and we all know how that's gone. But a 5-set comeback, just down 2 sets, only the second time in his career he's done that, could be a huge step for him and some boost going forward.
Well, the biggest step for him is that when he was down, he wasn't bloodying himself with his racket.
Yeah.
And that's really important. I mean, I sort of say it in a facetious way, but, when you talk to him, like, he knows he's got a big problem and he's not going to find any success with that formula, and that he needs to behave differently and get control of himself, because once he gets to there, he's gone and he's not having 5-set comebacks.
No, he took it point by point, one point, one game, one set at a time, and it really paid off well, winning down the stretch. One of two sets to love comebacks in the 5-set format today, along with Yuri Lehechka. The last player on the men's side I wanted to bring up to you, Matt, because he is an American, he's done well, but Brandon Nakashima is playing some great tennis, and this is not a fluke. This is not a flash in the pan for this tournament. It's been happening. He's got big wins. Obviously beat Fritz in Cincinnati. He beats Holger, and he keeps it going in the next round against Arthur Cazaux. So Brandon Nakashima, with his game, with his serve, seems like he's arriving on the big stage.
Yeah, I thought he had arrived a couple of years ago, and then he just sort of had that lull. He ran into some injuries that I think most of us didn't know about. And he's, done the hard work and played challengers, played small tournaments, and worked his way back up. And, when he is in sync, he has a very solid game. I think he sort of lulls people to sleep a litlittle bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, now that he's got another couple wins in a big tournament, he's not going to be, nobody's going to be sleeping on him anymore.
No, he isn't. I saw the stat. He's top 10 in hold percentage. He is a very well-rounded player. Also has a very unique mental makeup in a strong way. He's able to just withstand the charges on the other side. So Nakashima's coming on quickly. An unfortunate ending for Holger Rune, though. Also should bring that up. It did not go well. He didn't win a set in any of the hard court majors this year, Australia and U.S. Open. And another guy like Tsitsipas, you'd like to see him get the coaching team situation figured out and see what that could do for his development.
And both him and Tsitsipas have had a lot of involvement from a parent. And, look, when I was working in my early and mid-20s, I wouldn't have wanted a parent on my shoulder telling me what to do, telling me, how to punctuate every sentence. So how is it different when you're a tennis player? I think you need independence.
I agree with that. I'm also not a complete fan. I like the honesty from Holger. I don't know that I agree with the no disrespect to my opponent, but I played awful statements on Twitter. It's unique to him, and I appreciate the honesty, but I don't know if that's the best move either.
Yeah, he's got some things to learn in the emotional intelligence category.
Well, let's look at the women's side of things because there's still a lot of drama and development going on there. We've got a couple top seeds that came in the favorite region. Sabalenka has just been steamrolling. I guess we can start there. She wins again today, crushing the opponent to get to round 3. Wins Cincinnati, doesn't drop a set. 2 quick matches to start the U.S. Open. Came in as the favorite, has looked every bit the part. Is there another step to her game, or is there a sign that you wouldn't like to see if you're supporting her? What in her game can excel here, and when does it kind of go awry?
Look, I think when she's healthy, she's the best player in the world when tennis isn't being played on red clay. She's, got just about everything these days. And the times when she hasn't performed well, she's either had issues off court, like with the death of her former boyfriend earlier this year, or with the injuries ahead of Wimbledon and through the spring. And, she was smart. She stayed out of the Olympics. She took time off. She dropped out of Wimbledon. She got healthy. And if she's healthy, then, I'd say she's the favorite.
I agree with that. I think the ceiling, for a lack of a better term for me, when she's at her best on this surface and everyone else is at their best, I'd take Sabalenka. Which we know that isn't always the case, and I think one of the reasons why on the flip side, Matt, that she's played so well recently in the last couple of years is that she's raised her floor, and no player has been consistent across surfaces at all majors. So has Sabalenka. So we'll see. Iga won her first matchup. It was tricky. She was probably fortunate, I think it's safe to say, to win in straight sets, given how that tiebreak turned for her. But Iga on hard court, still a very, very exceptional player, Matt. But is always going to be judged with her clay court unfairly to how dominant she is there. But on hard court, she still can be a very, very dangerous player and is very capable of winning the whole thing.
She didn't look happy or comfortable yesterday. I think she knows that something's off, that she's not sort of playing where she needs to be playing. And you could see the concern on her face. She won that match. She did not smile. She didn't celebrate. It was just sort of like, get me off the court, get me something cold to drink, and get me to the video so I can figure out what's wrong.
Yeah. I guess I could ask a follow-up to that as a journalist. Do you appreciate that more? Like, where she stands. She doesn't really have, like Jannik, I guess, doesn't have the best poker face. You can kind of see when she's upset out there.
Yeah, I think it is refreshing, but I guess I worry about her a little because she seems to really get stressed in ways where I sometimes wish where she would think like, everybody loses matches. Steffi Graf lost matches. Martina Navratilova lost matches. And, she's that good. And it's tennis.
Yeah.
You're going to lose it. And so, I don't know, but she seems to take things very, very hard. The Olympics was just brutal.
Yeah. What's unfortunate and unfair to her now is that she's gotten so good at the French Open that now just a year when she only wins that is not deemed as successful. And I think it's unfair. It just shows you, how dominant she's been on that surface that and herself maybe a little bit is taking that for granted. So, I keep coming back to that. Like, there's still a lot to be. She's won Roland Garros again. Like, it's a successful year in my book.
Question is, is her game sort of getting to the point where she only wins that slam? I do think she's got to sort of widen her margins and maybe bring some more variety.
Yeah.
This is a girl who could spin the ball like no one else when she first got on the scene. So I think just for entertainment purposes, I'd like to see more of that, but also it's possible she'll need to do that more to win on other surface.
So looking at the defending champ from last year, Coco Gauff, another player that didn't really come in playing or feeling well, won her first match convincingly, is going to play in about 40 minutes at the time of this recording. But where are we at with Coco? Her game, but also her mental state, very open person, understandably has a lot of pressure on her going into this tournament. But where are we at with Coco as she looks to defend her title?
I'll go back to what she said, which is the positive of losing early in Cincinnati was she got a training block. And I it sounds crazy that this sport, the schedule is so relentless that like players just don't get training blocks.
Yeah.
And they're so important. And she got one. And I don't know, we'll see. How you start a tournament isn't how you finish it necessarily, but you got to start it well in order to get to the next step.
Yeah, you certainly do. I think, losing that ranking didn't, losing it going down to 3 with the points she has on. I think she's very clear-minded and mature. She can put that loss behind her and try to put her best foot forward going into this round against Maria and then beyond. Could play Svitolina, could play Kostuk. There's opportunities for players that show up against her, but it's still a very good player. And it could be Emma Navarro who's playing right now, too. That would be a 4th-round showdown if we see it, the player that beat her in the last major at Wimbledon. Emma has really taken that next step this year, Matt, and I don't think we should be totally surprised. It was one thing when she beat Sabalenka at Indian Wells, but now, she rose 100 spots in the ranking last year, and she's still climbing.
And she was great at Indian Wells, sort of the last really massive hardcourt tournament when you think about it. And I think we saw there what she could potentially do here, even though it's a much different court. It's slower, but she's obviously going to feel very comfortable here. More fans know her. She's getting a lot more support.
Yeah.
And I think she's very aware of sort of where she is and where she can go.
So I'm weighing 2 different things on this next player, and I want to just talk it out with you. Jessica Pegula beats Shelby Rogers. Again, props to Shelby Rogers for a great career, capping it off at the U.S. Open last night. But Pegula wins that match. She gets on to the second round. I thought she had an unbelievable run-up, obviously, in the hardcourt season, winning in Canada, losing in the final to Sabalenka in Cincinnati. So I would think, given the question marks with some of the other top players, that she's a contender here. But history says one thing, and that she hasn't gotten past the quarterfinals. So how do you weigh those 2 things? Her form this year, how she's looked, but also that resume spot for her that she's never made a major semifinal.
It's on her mind, and Iga's a bad matchup for her, and I think she plays her in
quarters.
Yeah. So I'm not looking for it to happen this time.
I guess part of it too, I think that taking time off, similar to Sabalenka, wasn't fully healthy, got healthy. It wasn't the best showing Wimbledon in the Olympics, but she rounded herself into form and she can do things on the hard courts. I think that given where the top players are, I think this maybe, and you could tell me I'm wrong, but I think there's more of an opening, maybe in her mind, maybe in my mind, that, these top players, maybe with the exception of Sabalenka, they aren't in their best form as of right now.
I think that's sort of often the case with the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
At the end of the season, people are tired.
Yeah.
This is going to be the random one in some ways. Rafa struggled here. Federer didn't win the last decade of his career.
Yeah, 08 was the last one.
Yeah. So, there are openings. That's sort of what this tournament offers.
Do you see a player that I haven't mentioned yet that you think could walk through with the openings? If there, is a player that you're thinking semifinal, maybe even final and beyond?
I just think he's proved all year. Zverev is very strong. Yeah. And he's been to the final here before. He's comfortable. He's healthy. And I don't think anyone wants to play him.
Yeah, on that side of the men's draw where he'd get Djokovic, Sinner, and Alcaraz on the other, that could be very good for him. On the women's side, I was just also thinking, too, she won again today, dropped the first set again, but Chin Wen, how she's looked, and seems like a newly confident person. It's remarkable what a gold medal can do for you sometimes.
Yeah, I think she's winning matches that she would have lost a year ago. That's what she said the other day, that first round match. And I think it did do a lot for her. Australia, a little less so, because she didn't beat a lot of great players on the way to that final. It was a completely blown up side of the draw. But she beat Swiatek in Paris, and then played a great match against Vekic. And she feels good about her game, and I think she learned a lot from the post-Australia experience. Yeah. She went on a bit of a Rumspringa. And I sort of celebrated that a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And she's not doing that this time.
Yeah, getting to the top, getting that first taste of glory at the top. Sometimes there's an adjustment period. Now you're dealing with all these players' best shots. So she adjusted. She's gotten to where she needs, and I agree, winning matches that she would not have won otherwise. A couple more things I just wanted to bring up on the women's side. Jasmine Paolini, Bianca Andreescu, one of the matches of the tournament, and tough luck for Andreescu. 3 major matches against Paolini and has nothing to show for it.
Not this year. This is a different Jasmine Paolini. And, how do you explain it? We're still figuring it out.
It's not a fluke. I mean, like maybe there is something to be said for positive thinking and just not getting down on yourself mid-match, because I agree. You watched that match and she was playing Cincinnati qualifying a year ago, but you watched the match last night. She's serving very well. She's playing smart tennis. She's hitting winners. This wasn't, there's nothing fluky about the tennis if you just take the ranking and play her out of it.
And she lost first set. And, I was sitting in this stadium and you could see she was completely unbothered by it. She was like, I know I'm going to win this match.
Yeah.
Andreescu doesn't have the engine. I got this. I'm fine. Sort of like when Coco, I think it was 2 years ago, when she lost the first set tiebreaker to Mira Andreeva.
Yeah.
And she was like, no problem. I'll be okay.
Yeah, that's a very mature player. And again, hitting her stride later in her pro career is great. The other one is, too, it was an unfortunate ending for Danielle Collins, losing to Caroline Dolehide in the first round of her final U.S. Open. Big win for Dolehide. The American moves on. Collins wanted absolutely nothing to do with the post-match ceremony, but an unfortunate ending at the U.S. Open for Collins shows you the depth of the women's game in American tennis. Dolehide playing one of the best matches she's done on tour.
And it also shows you Collins just wasn't really in great health. And she doesn't want to say too much about that because, she respects her opponents. But she, had heat stroke at the Olympics, or certainly heat exhaustion. And she's immunocompromised, and it just sort of stayed with her for a while. And she's out of gas.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, too, as a fan, just watching her and not, taking anything away. Rafa was like that a lot, too, and never really say when stuff was bothering him. Hope she gets to play out the rest of her year, but we shall see. Any other thoughts on the women's draw before I let you go here, Matt Futterman?
It's could be outdated by the time this runs, but I'm incredibly impressed by Iva Jovic.
Yeah.
16 years old and got a wild card, won her first match. She's right in the midst of a 3-set war with Katerina Alexandrova.
Yeah.
And showing great maturity out there on just a miserable hot day. So she might be the next great American.
I'm laughing because she saved a match point. I did notice that in this match. And I think she said she's playing in 5 different draws at this tournament. Can't ever remember hearing a number that high.
And the other day was her first WTA level match in a main draw. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of these women have gotten, wild cards into Austin or somewhere, but not her. This is it.
Yeah, the other note that I had too, and I don't want to bring this up to begrudge certain things, just to get your perspective on things, but Keys took out Maya Joint today, amateur player that says she's still going to go to Texas, and that whole topic came up about she's declining prize money. It's a lot of money for winning that first round match, and I too was looking at it like, now that we're in the era of NIL, I think prize money can be allotted to these players. I kind of got it in the past, but I don't know if you had a take on the situation with now some of these amateur players who, first round money is not anything to laugh at, and unfortunately can't accept it.
It's the worst, most unfair rule in college sports. I mean, if you're a college football player, you can, get $1 million for signing autographs for an hour.
Yeah.
But she qualifies and then wins a first round match and can't get paid for her sweat and hard work. So it's absurd.
I just don't understand it now in this day and age with NIL and all that. Like, it should be worked out, but unfortunately for her, it wasn't. Best of luck with her going forward. Matt Futterman, this has been a pleasure. Any stories or any pieces of work you got coming out in The Athletic we should know about?
I can't tell you what I'm working on. Come on.
Okay.
Tip off the competition. Okay. Everybody listens to you, Mitch.
Okay. All right. Well, how about the most recent story? I did notice the Jannik Sinner one. Is that the most recent story that we should direct people to?
Yeah, that dropped today. I do think I have,
that's good.
An interesting take on that, which is that basically he did nothing wrong, and that the rules have not caught up with the science. And that's not just my thinking. That's the thinking of some of the, biggest hard asses on anti-doping, people like Travis Tygart. And we're testing for such tiny levels of this stuff that is, inconsequential, unhelpful, and, so obviously unintentional. But yet he's got to deal with the ramifications of this because, the rules required provisional suspensions and hearings and, public disclosure. And, and people are always going to just think doping is Barry Bonds. And there are nuances in it.
It's a very complex issue. I encourage all of our listeners to check out Matt Futterman's article on The Athletic about Jannik Sinner, that saga, everything going forward. Matt, this was a blast. Thanks again for joining Tennis Channel Inside In. You're welcome anytime. Enjoy the U.S. Open. Try to stay cool when you can. But thanks for coming on the podcast. It's always a treat.
No, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.